It's our fault for saying we're getting better.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything worked right the first time until we, like fools, we tested it.
Words About Books is a poorly spoken podcast. Once a month, we get together and, like a book club, we talk about a specific book. And this month, we went all in on Twilight. So we're going to unwind with a story about the implied murder of one's parents. I'm Nate, and of course, as always, I'm joined by Ben.
I recommended the story.
You also recommended Twilight.
I did, yes. Unfortunately, both parents survived Twilight. Not Charlie, though. I mean, Charlie's an angel. But
Charlie's great.
Charlie's angel. Oh my god, I just got it. Okay. Yeah, no, we're talking about The Veldt by Ray Bradbury.
I would love to feed Renee to lions.
Yeah. Well, and Renee in real life would probably have raised a child who would have fed her to lions. So yeah, we're talking about The Veldt by Ray Bradbury. This was, I guess I'll do a quick little background on this story. We're going to cover a Ray Bradbury book later in the year, The Halloween Tree, I believe.
Something Wicked This Way Comes?
I was close.
The Halloween Tree? Is that like a Christmas tree, but decked out in orange and black?
It's similar to a Christmas tree, but more fatalities, I guess. The point is, we're covering Ray Bradbury in more depth. He's going to get his own episode, so I don't want to go too deep into it here. Obviously, Ray Bradbury is super famous. If you don't know who he is, you're probably younger than me. Ray Bradbury is one of the, I'd say, like, greats of classic sci-fi. He wrote most of his stuff in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. To me, he's best known for writing Fahrenheit 451, which was assigned reading in my high school. He's written a bunch of other famous stuff, Halloween Tree, Something Wicked This Way Comes. But if you haven't read anything by Ray Bradbury, The Veldt is a great start, and you can find The Veldt in a collection of his short stories called The Illustrated Man, and pretty much everything in that collection is solid, but The Veldt really stands out to me. Doing our due diligence, The Veldt is a short story first appearing as The World the Children Made in an issue of the Saturday Evening Post. It was published in a newspaper. Huh. Can you imagine a world where...
I can't imagine a world where newspapers were a thing.
No, I was going to say where like short fiction was so beloved that newspapers published it.
That was because they didn't have kick-ass TV back then, so...
They had kick-ass radio.
I mean, did they?
Oh, yeah, dude. Orson Welles. Look at me. Guess my age, viewers.
50.
Imagine a time when podcasts were the primary form of entertainment. A better time.
Oh, jeez. That's a good point. But we have yet to convince people that an alien invasion is happening.
No, I don't. Well, I don't have the authoritative tones of Orson Welles. If I spoke with Orson Welles' voice, you'd listen, damn it.
Was that Orson Welles?
Yeah, I believe so.
Huh. All right, what were we talking about? We're talking about
we were talking
printing
talking
his
about
story in a newspaper.
Yeah, he printed his story in a newspaper under the title "The World the Children Made." It was later republished under the current name The Veldt in The Illustrated Man in 1951. So I guess I want to ask you though, because I've already read this story, so I'm coming to this for the second time. I can't give a first impression. So have you ever read anything by Ray Bradbury?
I don't think so.
Did you have any impressions about Ray Bradbury going into this?
No, other than my wife liked him.
Okay.
So therefore, I would also need to like him or suffer her wrath.
I need to send your wife a song. educated viewers may know which song I'm thinking about sending.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds by the Beatles.
I am shocked that you know that. I'm shocked that you know that is a song.
What? I am a very cultured man.
There you go. I sent you something.
Oh boy. Just reading the title.
Maybe I'll tweet this for our listeners. But anyway.
Right. Yeah,
back to
anyway.
the podcast,
Back to Ray Bradbury.
Yes. I don't really want to get too much more into his career or anything. Because like I said, we're going to be covering all that in a later episode. So, yeah, Illustrated Man, check it out.
Yeah, it's great. All right, I sent that to my wife, and back to Ray Bradbury. You completely derailed my train of thought. So yeah, the Veldt. Veldt is great. It takes like 10 or 15 minutes to read, but it's just jam-packed full of ideas and tension, and it's a well done story. It managed to achieve in what, like however many pages?
This could not be more than 15 pages.
Yeah, it's like next to nothing. And yet it manages to achieve in that slim amount what most of the books we've read on the podcast have failed to do in an entire book. So, kudos to Ray Bradbury. I would him too.
Yeah, I know you were asking me why I picked this one, and it was, there's a handful of stories in The Illustrated Man that stand out to me, but this is the only one that without having to even open the book, I remember everything that happened. And it's been years since I read that story. I obviously read it again for the podcast, but I guess we'll do a quick summary. I really think you should read it, and it wouldn't take much time, but let's give a quick summary just so we can establish what we're talking about for anyone who hasn't read it.
Yeah, now's the chance to pause the podcast and go read it, and then you can come back.
I found a free copy at some Russian university just by Googling, so maybe I shouldn't have said that. But
Oops.
It's out there. Just I didn't post it. Maybe it won't be up there by the time you Google this. I don't know.
So, The Veldt is a story set in the future, and it's an awesome future of plenty. And the story is told from George and Lydia Hadley? Is that how you...
That's how I would say it, yeah.
Okay. I'm bad with names, Ben. So, they bought a future house that they also bought what's called a nursery for, which is basically the holodeck from Star Trek, but it has a psychic link to your brain. And your kids can go in there, and they can create whatever they want, and just have a great time, right? Well, the children turned this nursery into a hot African veldt complete with lions that are eating some strange carcass just off in the distance where you can't tell what it is. When they first go in there, the lions start to stalk the two of them, and they run out, like, in a panic. George said it was just like a natural reaction from him, because he's like laughing about it, like, those are really real, right? And his wife's like crying, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to just be, there's 5 characters in the story, and we'll get to that, but he does a good job of establishing not just 5 characters, but how this future tech works, how it's supposed to work. At this point in the story, you already know that it's just supposed to be like a mirage.
Holotape and a bunch of other shit is what he's saying.
It projects 3-dimensional images and surround sound, and it even has like some kind of olfactory, like smell generating thing. So to all your senses really except touch, this appears to be the African veldt, but nothing in it's supposed to be real. It's basically just a really fancy 3D movie or VR.
Right.
So that's why they they see these lions and they run away and they think, oh, isn't it silly that we ran from this like video game?
Well, his wife doesn't think that. His wife's freaking the hell out.
To the guy, this is like all those clips of people putting on a VR headset and like falling over.
So they begin to hear screams from the nursery that are a bit too loud and a bit too real, And as the story progresses, they also think like there's something familiar about it, but they can't place their finger on it. So their kids returned from a trip. I can't remember what they were doing. It's not that important. But the kids are kind of like really cold towards their parents. They don't really do anything with them in a way that you would expect a family to. Like their parents are eating dinner and the kids are like, "Oh, we can just sit here and watch, I guess." And and the dad's like, "So why is the nursery an African veldt full of like murder lions?" And they're like, "No, it's not." And the daughter runs in and changes it from a veldt to like some fantasy world that is what the parents are used to it being.
Oh, you're skipping over two things. I don't even know if I would have noticed this the first time through, but it really stood out the second time as just like part of what you said, just the masterful storytelling of getting all the important information out front. And like you don't necessarily notice it, but your brain does. He mentions that the kids have been cold since he wouldn't let them go on a trip. The kids wanted to go to New York City by themselves, and the father said no. And the kids have been basically giving him the cold shoulder since then. And that's also when the nursery became stuck on this Africa setting. And when they're in there, the dad tries to change the setting.
Ah, yes, that's true.
He says to the nursery, like, "Hey, how about something else? How about like Alice in Wonderland or something like that?" And it just stays on the Africa scene, even though the machine is supposed to respond to whatever human user happens to be in there. It's just supposed to respond to their thoughts. But he's issuing verbal commands and he can't get it to change. And so then when the kids come home and they're like, "It's not on Africa. What do you mean, Father?" And the daughter goes into the room and changes it and comes back and says, "I don't know what you're talking about. It's on this." It's like, how does she do that? That's just another layer of, obviously the kids are creepy.
Yeah, they're gaslighting their parents.
They're gaslighting the parents, and they're doing a really poor job of it.
The parents do not buy this for a second. They're like, "Okay, she obviously ran in there and changed it."
Yeah, and I like that because it does highlight just how immature these kids are. Like, I don't know if we're ever given specific ages for them.
The boy is the older of the two. He's probably like 10 or 12.
I was going to say 10 max, I think.
Yeah.
Like, they're pretty young.
And I think the sister is probably a few years younger than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so George decides he's going to lock up this nursery, but they just break in during the night.
Yeah.
And George and Lydia are like, I don't feel like being a parent, and so they just go to bed.
Yeah, no, the best part is they know that the kids are breaking back into the nursery because they hear the screaming again.
Yes.
It's like, so I imagine at this point you know what the screaming is.
Yeah, I figured that out pretty quickly.
Like,
and I also spoiled it at the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah.
Although you might consider re-recording the intro with how I botched it, you know. But yeah, so the next day they get the psychologist out because I guess that's what you do. You call a psychologist, and he looks at the nursery and he's like, "Wow, those kids are." And
yeah, he really like does not pull a lot of punches with his assessment of the children. George, I'm going to level with you here. The kids are sociopaths. I've seen this before. I'll probably see it again. It's not good, George. It's not good. And he just says that like over a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Like,
I recommend you shut all this shit off because it's replaced you as parents in your kids' eyes. They care more about that nursery than they care about you, George. Shut it all off. Come to my, I don't know, like log cabin or something. And for the next year, I'm going to meet with them every day to try to fix them.
Yeah. I guess there's two things to kind of unpack with that is that that was kind of a thing in like 50s sci-fi of like psychology as a widely accepted field of study was kind of new.
Yeah,
to the public
Dr.
at least.
Sigmund Freud.
So I think he thought doctors make house calls. In the future, psychologists will make house calls, and you'll just call them like a doctor whenever you have psychology problems.
The good old future where they actually give a shit about mental health and they're funding it.
Yeah, so I think that was a little like awkward as a modern day reader, being like, oh yeah, we just rang up the psychologist and he came over for a free consultation.
Oh, I'll be over right away. Oh, your kids are up in the head. I'm gonna charge them every day to see me.
Oh, but the psychologist also mentions that like one of the original purposes of these nursery simulations was to study the minds of the users, and he can kind of tell just by the profile of the room that this is abnormal behavior.
We've studied your kids' behavior, and you're bad
turns
parents.
out, George, they have vivid fantasies of murdering you.
You and your wife.
Now don't worry, George, it happens all the time. It's vigorous exercise is what I recommend.
Yeah, we can fix this by talking about his dreams and shit, because I'm pretty sure this is based on Sigmund Freud, and
don't come up with cute little I hate when people do that. Like I don't like a person, so I'm gonna give them a funny name.
I said that's the second time I said that, so
I know, and I let it go once.
Good, Ben. I'm trying to get under your skin.
Nate, I could tell by the configuration of your silly names that you're suffering from terminally small penis.
That is what Freud would suggest. With him, it was always you're trying to kill someone or you're trying to fuck someone, or possibly both, and usually your parents. So
look, I don't know about the parents thing, but a lot of human civilization is driven by killing and or fucking, so it's not unreasonable for him to start there.
That's fair, I guess. I guess I'll say that's fair so we can move on. So George decides to power down the nursery and also the entire house. His kids throw a tantrum. And rather than, just ignoring them and say, pack up your shit, we're going, they're like, George, they're really carrying on. Can you let them have one last visit to the nursery? And George was like, well, I haven't been parenting this entire story, and I'm not going to start now, so yeah, okay. This is after the son said, I wish you were dead, directly to his face. That should have gotten him 5 across the eyes.
I like how we're going all 50s on this. All right, they can have 1 minute. And then the son is like, oh, bless you, Father. Thank you. Thank you. A minute's all we need.
Yeah.
And then
the reader, know, oh, okay,
Yeah.
You just signed your death warrant, buddy.
Yeah. Well, and I really like that, though, too, is that the most unbelievable part of the story is that they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, I guess, in talking about sort of the themes of the story.
Well, what happens next is George is like, all right, you can have 1 minute. I'm going to go get dressed. And Lydia's like, okay, I'll take the children to the nursery and leave them alone and come back here because I also want to get dressed. You're going to leave your sociopathic children alone? So, yeah, then the children call for them, and they're like, where are you, children? And they're like, we're inside the virtual reality room. And then they go in there, and the doors seal on them, and the kid's like, don't let them ever shut you off again. And so, yeah, the lions, it's implied. I assume that the lions eat their parents, because I can't imagine that the epilogue to this story is George and Lydia are like, that was not a cool prank, children.
So the scene that plays out time and time again you described it a little, but I'm going to go in a little bit more detail here. The scene that plays out again and again in the nursery is a pack of lions are eating some unidentifiable carcass.
That screams.
Well, they never see what screamed, but they hear a scream, and then they always see the lions eating the carcass. And the lions are too far through it to really determine what animal the carcass belongs to. But one of the interesting things that's implied is that the son is intelligent, like he has some above average IQ, and that he's constantly messing with machines, and perhaps he's messed with the simulation. And the other thing, right before the father decides to shut off the room, as he's like walking through it, he finds on the ground near one of the carcasses, covered in blood,
Oh, yes.
his wallet.
Yeah.
And it's, to me at least, it's implied that that is some kind of copy of his wallet.
Yes, that's what I read it as well.
Yeah, so that the room was actually now creating three-dimensional objects. It wasn't, he could touch it.
Right.
It wasn't just...
His hand didn't go through it. It was a
it
real
wasn't
object.
just an illusion anymore. So I just wanted to explain that because that's... I don't know, it's just part of the setup that's paid off when they slam the doors and the lions surround them, and it's like, yep, only now do we realize, even after the wallet, like, that is the most unbelievable part. But,
yeah.
like, when I've read so many accounts of this, like, to me, there was never any doubt that the room murdered the parents. But I guess, like, everywhere I've read, it's an implied ending, but...
It's heavily implied.
I'm 100% sure the parents
Yes,
were murdered
yes.
by the room.
That's the best ending. Because
The only reason it's implied is because it was published in the newspaper.
well, I think it's better that it's implied though. I don't think this story needs a graphic murder scene at the end of it.
No, absolutely not. But I don't think... What I mean to say is I don't think Ray Bradbury intended for the ending to be ambiguous.
No.
I don't think you're supposed to
not.
wonder if they're still alive or not. They're not.
No, they're lion food. Now I don't know, because at the end the psychologist shows up and he's like, "Where are your parents?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, they'll be here shortly." And I was like, does the psychologist know? Is he gonna put two and two together?
The psychologist comes in, and the children are having a picnic lunch in the room. And the little girl says that the little girl says that her parents will be along presently. And then she offers the psychologist a cup of tea. The first time I read that, I was like, oh, okay, the psychologist is just going to figure it out, and these kids are going to jail.
Oh, I figured that the psychologist was going to figure it out, and then he would also be mauled. I was like, you need to run, dude.
Well, so I thought the first time they lured the parents in, the kids had copies of themselves in the room call for the parents, and then both kids were waiting outside to slam the door.
That's what I thought as well.
This time, I thought the real children were inside, so they can't slam the door on the psychologist. I don't think they were planning to kill him. But the second time I read it, like the first time I read it, I didn't think the children had the wherewithal to get away with the crime. I thought the clumsy attempt at gaslighting sort of showed that they were just sociopathic, immature children.
Right.
But the second time I read it, I thought maybe they're going to have the room conjure three-dimensional, malleable copies of their parents.
Did I inspire that line of thinking when I asked, would the kids just, like, make their parents if they ever felt bad for murdering them later in life?
No, I actually was thinking about that when I reread it, when she said they'll be along presently.
I see.
I didn't remember. I couldn't think of any other reason for her to say that.
Now, is it going to be weird when, like, the parents can't leave the holodeck?
Well, we don't know that they can't because that wallet left the holodeck.
So I guess now I'm wondering is why no one else has discovered that this room can generate matter.
Well, now you're into the
That's probably
Star
unfair.
Trek, the Star Trek problem of when does the holodeck ever not come to life? It seems like literally every time we step into this.
Yeah. Every episode, the safeties get disabled and it comes to life. Yep.
Why can it even do that? Why are there safeties?
Yes, why can the holodeck punch me or stab me?
This is so much what we talk about, like when we read longer form fiction. This story works perfectly as a short cautionary tale with a twist ending.
Yes.
Doesn't overstay its welcome. Doesn't stick around long enough for you to think about all the reasons it's not possible.
You
it
didn't
just gets in and
you
it gets
didn't
out.
have 20 pages of them eating breakfast and then going to work and then coming back home.
It's just Ray Bradbury, I think the thing I like most about his writing is that I think I actually compared him to Agatha Christie when I was talking to you. The way Agatha Christie's stories are timeless because her stories are all about human interaction, and human interactions are never really going to change. They like the mediums in which they happen may change, but people are always going to be people. Ray Bradbury can kind of dissect that same kind of basic human nature, but with relation to our tools and technology. So as long as people are people, they're gonna interact with technology in sort of the same ways. And even though this story has a lot of like clumsy stuff, like the psychologist making house calls, and there's a bunch of other like kind of corny technology that is like the auto scrubbers scrub, and they clean and wash us and bathe us and feed us, and all like the house is just perfect. It's this perfect
how awesome
machine
is this
that
house? We need to talk about that at some point.
We'll talk about that in a second, but like the story holds up even though there's some corny dated bits because we have VR technologies like that, and they are raising our children right now. Like we are in a moment where like teaching is happening remotely, and I know it's not perfect, and I know my brother would kill me if I said that the remote teaching had replaced actual teachers, because he has some very good points about how it hasn't, but like I can't tell you how many like young parents I know that you can hand the kid an iPad and they're good to go. And I'm not saying that they're wrong to do that or that the iPad is raising their child.
But the iPad has replaced the parents in that child's heart.
No, but it could. We all know that kid who can't not have his iPad. There's a difference. I mean, like you could give a kid an iPad to entertain them while you're having a boring conversation with another adult. But if the kid cries whenever you take the iPad away, then we got a problem. And that's what this nursery
They're going to go on and program a 80s nostalgia bait VR game and come up with a Easter egg hunt in it.
Well, I don't think it's unreasonable for Ray Bradbury to have seen, even with the technology that was just emerging at the time, that it almost seemed like kids would be more upset if their television broke than if their parent went away. That is a frightening thought, and it is something you can kind of see, because little kids, they don't really understand death, and that's what makes them so terrifying. I'm sorry, you're having a child. I don't want to do this to you right now, but
that's okay. I think I can take her in a fight.
They're like little people that are just, I mean, you know better than most.
Yeah,
like,
I've seen Dune the movie.
At what age are kids indistinguishable from psychopaths?
Let's see. All the way up to age 21.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Children are terrifying, and if you don't make an effort to play an active role in their lives, and you allow technology to replace you, and then you try to take that technology away,
they'll sick some lions on you and kill you, and then they'll replace you with a virtual copy.
This was made to be an extreme example of neglect almost.
Yeah, their parents are not good.
Ray Bradbury wasn't saying that any child who uses this room is going to be a problem, but
it's if the room raises your child.
It applies so broadly to a wide variety of technologies. Any technology that allows you to project your own preferences on the world and only engage with what is essentially a reflection of your own desires, that's going to drive you literally insane. Like, these kids live entirely in a world of their own creation. They're never checked. They're never forced to experience anything other than exactly what they want. And that is horrible for your development. You know, you need gravity to build strong bones. You need resistance to build muscle. It's like you need challenges in your life. And these kids are never challenged. They're never encountering any structure or boundaries or anything. It's just the room. And so their fantasies are allowed to run wild, and they run to sociopathic, violent places.
So why they have a psychologist friend, it sounds like, or at least one who's willing to come out. Like, why are they such bad parents? How did they let it get this far?
I get the impression that the family is kind of, I don't want to say like new money, but it doesn't seem like they've been very rich for very long, because they just recently bought this house, and the house is not cheap. I had to do a little math because the house is, they actually give the price. It's $30,000, which in 1950 was a lot of money. Roughly the equivalent of $322,171 today.
That's not that much.
Plus another $151,000 for the nursery. They spent almost $500,000 on this house. And I do know people who have spent $300,000 on a house, and I get a migraine just thinking about signing that mortgage. But that's not something... It's not something you need to be ultra rich to have, but you need to be pretty well off. Like, you need to be...
No, you can just make bad decisions.
Well, you know more about mortgages. You're a homeowner. I'm not. And probably never will be.
Oh.
I've just given up.
Ouch.
Yeah, no, I thought about trying once, man, and it's not for me. So my point is, that's still a decent chunk of money.
It's the coolest house for that amount of money.
Yeah, I guess there is a certain amount of it's the future. So I would say like their house is consumer grade tech, but it's near top of the line. Is that fair?
That sounds about right. That sounds fair.
So it's not like something only Bill Gates can have, but it's still considered splurging. Like, most people still do their dishes in a dishwasher. They don't have an automatic like robot that actually just takes the dish off the table and then, yeah, there's still...
Poor people can't afford little robots to grab their plates.
I say that because the mom comments about how am I supposed to compete with this house?
You can't.
Like,
game over. You lose.
I can't rock my children to sleep better than the automated rocking machine. I can't cook better than the cooking machine. I can't. Yeah. I'm a flawed human being.
If you've seen the episode of The Simpsons where they move and Homer works for a Bond villain, Marge's story is Lydia in this story. The house is just doing all the work for her, so she starts drinking wine to cope.
Well, first off, Ray Bradbury has been such a huge influence on, like, The Simpsons and Futurama, it's not even funny.
And Star Trek, and I'm sure we can find his fingerprints all over a bunch of properties.
Yeah, but the main thing is people need a purpose, and Ray Bradbury is sitting here tackling these issues of, like, in 1950, he sees automation gets to a point where it replaces the role of a mother. And that's probably the most extreme example. That's like one of the most human activities a human can do is be a parent. And the machines, they've allowed the machines to replace them in their most sacred human role. And now they're suffering for their hubris. I could be a lit professor.
Yeah. Turn in your assignments by the end of the week.
I won't read them. I will grade you based on what I feel you deserve.
Yeah, you really could be a lit professor. Yeah, when I was reading this, I just thought of those stories that I've heard from like colleagues and whatnot, like their kids, or usually it's like a nephew or a niece, and they hear it from their sisters or brothers. They're like, yeah, the kids acted up, so we changed the password on the router so they couldn't get in, but the kids found a way to hack, or not hack, but, you know, they got into the router anyway. I'm going to have to be smarter than my kids forever? It's a lot of pressure.
You just have to be smart enough that your kids feel like they need to hide it from you.
That's fair. They need to gaslight me.
What are your thoughts on... Did this story, like...
Yes, we're going to hide all technology from the child for the first 10 years of life.
I'm a. I guess I've mentioned it on the podcast enough. I'm a programmer, and
Are you? When did this
Yes.
happen?
I'm a programmer. I've had a couple of different roles in the IT industry, and I really I would agonize over what age to get my kid their first phone at.
Yeah, that's something that I have no experience with because I didn't get a phone until I was like almost out of high school.
Oh yeah, well, and I didn't get my first smartphone until I was in college.
Oh
was
yeah, I
using-
didn't get my first smartphone until I was working for a living.
Like, how much is too much? Because you don't want your kid to be like the weirdo who doesn't have any technology.
Yeah.
Like, if every
Well, I
kid
mean,
has an
I
iPad.
do. My kid's going to school wearing like a weaved leaf and stick shirt. Gonna have
I
a
was just
spear.
gonna say, like, you'd send him in some like Amish overalls and
Oh, perfect.
yeah. You don't want your kid to be a weirdo. You want them to. It's like we said before with Twilight a little bit. Is don't let Twilight teach your kids about relationships. like maybe get in there first. Maybe let them know that like it's fine if Edward and Bella are your like little soap opera telenovela type drama, but don't aspire to that. Maybe set an example for your children. Maybe talk to them.
Or just have TV do it.
Well, that's what these parents do. That's the cardinal mistake. It's not that they bought their kids a nice house. It's not that they have this fancy VR thing. It's that they never interact with their kids.
Except for to tell them, no, you can't take a rocket to New York. And then the
Yeah.
kid's like, you son of a bitch. You're gonna rue the day that you met me, father.
I was trying to tell my wife doesn't listen to the podcast, so I can say this. I heard a noise downstairs, and I was trying to hear if my wife was singing or crying.
Ah.
I'm pretty sure I hear Blinded by the Light from The Weeknd playing.
So she's crying. For some reason, I thought you were gonna say that you thought you heard your wife scream, but you didn't. You don't know, and you'll go check later. And then there's gonna be a lion down there.
Yeah. No. Oh, dear. But yeah, like I said, there's a lot of, like, the rocket to New York is one of the corny things. I thought, like, it's one of those, that's a prediction that didn't quite pan out.
Yeah, just the fact that he's imagining public transportation of any kind.
I was gonna say, I'd settle for like, there is an Amtrak to New York that runs through my town, but it's like a 4-hour trip.
Yeah, I was gonna say, all you need to do is wait half a day. Yeah, I can go to Chicago. It's just gonna take me like a day to get there via train. What's the point?
Oh, well, I'll tell you what the point is, because I plan on doing this when COVID lifts. The point is, I don't have to park in New York.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I think I just fly though.
Oh, I'm not gonna. It's not. Worth the flight.
I guess that's because you're much closer in New York.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm revealing my location. I guess, though I think I revealed my location more when I announced that there was a exorcist sanctioned by the Vatican in my town.
No one.
God,
listens.
I hope I did. I hope that's not like real common. It's more common. We're way off topic. I'm going back to Head Full of Ghosts right now, but
Yeah. So, Ben, I don't want to do anything but look and listen and smell. What else is there to do? All right, and that's our episode, everyone.
yeah, bro, wait till you find out about touch.
Oh dear. I thought the answer would be like thinking, but no, I like yours a lot better.
Yeah, I know, like Ray Bradbury was like, oh, I'd like to have an emotionally intelligent conversation with another human being. And then listen to that song I was talking about by Rachel Bloom.
Yeah, I bet when they invent this technology, you could just Ray Bradbury.
Oh, well, speaking of fulfilling that desire, there is another fictional world we're going to be talking about soon.
Yeah, was it? I had to wonder, and you said it was just a coincidence, but this is real close to next month's book.
I dead serious, man. I don't think about Ready Player One.
Oh, but you have to now.
I totally, like, you asked, like, we wanted to do a short story, and I was thinking, like, what's a short story everybody can get? That was sort of like my main consideration, is like, The Illustrated Man is not going out of print anytime soon. It's not like one of my random, like, the year's best volumes that you're going to have to go to a thrift store to find. If I reference a story in the 2016 volume of the year's best horror, I don't know if everybody's going to be able to get that. But Ray Bradbury, that was my main reason for choosing it. But it does sort of jive with the themes of next month's book, which is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, which I'm currently reading, or attempting to.
How many highlights, Ben?
Oh boy, roughly 3 per page. You don't want to know, like, I was texting you last night. I was sitting on the couch, and I guess I just had this, like, scowl on my face. And my wife thought I was mad at her. And she goes, I love you. Is everything okay? And I was like, what? Yeah, no, I love you too. And I was like, oh, I realized, and I turned it around. I was like, no, I was just texting this. And it was a message to you that said, if I ever meet Ernest Cline's, I'm going to kick him in the teeth. So I guess we'll just let that be our preview of
I'm excited. This is going to be your Mountains of Madness. I'm excited.
I can't believe you could even, like, this is so much worse than the Mountains of Madness or Twilight. I'm just say that right now, fans of Ready Player One. This is worse than Twilight.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to defend it, Ben, but I guess...
Look, if Ready Player One is your favorite book, I'm not going to judge. I like Twilight.
How you had to stifle a laugh. I'm not going to judge.
I'm not going to judge. I like Twilight. You're allowed to like whatever you want. If you love Ready Player One and this is your favorite book, that's totally fine. I don't care. It's not about, like, it's not about bullying people for their media choices. I think you should listen to our episode on Ready Player One if it's your favorite book in the world, because while it is your favorite book, and that's totally fine, it has flaws.
Absolutely.
And it is important to recognize those flaws. And I suspect, from what I've heard about Ready Player 2, that Ernest Cline got sick of hearing about those flaws and tried to address each and every one of them in Ready Player 2 and failed. So, oh God. Yeah, follow us at WABpod on Twitter. Check out our blog at blog.wordsaboutbooks.ninja.
I'll be uploading my Twilight notes if I haven't already by this time.
I got a few things I need to post. I'm buried in editing right now. But the blog's going to be pretty active this month. And, of course, if you would not mind, if you like the podcast, we're trying to grow, and the best way to help us grow is if you share it with your friends on social media. We would definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, you can say that you knew us before it was cool.
I didn't know if you wanted to end the episode. I was just like, we were halfway through introducing Ready Player One, so I'm just like,
yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good place.